They say the loudest screams are the ones you never hear. For 10 years, Madeline had been the invisible woman, the dutiful wife standing in the shadow of Grant's arrogance. He thought he had won. He thought stripping her of her title, her home, and her dignity was the final victory in his game of power. He brought his mistress to the courthouse. He laughed when Madeline picked up the pen, but he didn't know that the signature on that paper wasn't a surrender. It was a death warrant for his old life. He expected her to leave in tears, broken and destitute. Instead, she walked out the door and into a machine that cost more than his entire company. And as the engine roared to life, Grant finally realized he hadn't just divorced his wife. He had declared war on the only person who had been keeping him alive. The conference room on the 42nd floor of the Halloway & O'Neill law firm smelled of old money and stale coffee. It was a cold, sterile environment, designed to intimidate, filled with heavy mahogany furniture and floor-to-ceiling windows that looked down on the bustling city of Chicago. But inside the room, the air was so thick with tension, it felt difficult to breathe. Grant sat at the head of the table, leaning back in the plush leather chair with the casual arrogance of a man who believed he held every ace in the deck. He checked his watch, a gold Patek Philippe that Madeline had bought him for his 35th birthday, and sighed loudly, making sure the sound carried across the room. "Are we almost done here?" Grant asked, directing his gaze not at his wife, but at his lawyer, a sharp-faced man named Benedict. "I have a lunch reservation at Le Monde in 30 minutes. Tiffany hates waiting." Across the table, Madeline sat perfectly still. She wore a simple, charcoal-grey dress that she had owned for years. Her hands were folded in her lap, her face a mask of impenetrable calm. She didn't flinch at the mention of Tiffany's name. She didn't react to the way Grant checked the time, as if ending their 10-year marriage was nothing more than an inconvenient errand before lunch. "We are just waiting for Mrs. Sterling to sign the final stipulation, Grant," Benedict said, sliding a thick stack of documents across the polished wood. "Once she signs, the settlement is binding. The house in the Hamptons, the primary accounts and the shares in Sterling Tech remain yours. She keeps the compact SUV and the small savings account in her name. No alimony, as per the prenuptial agreement triggered by, well, the circumstances." The circumstances were a fabrication, of course. Grant had accused her of infidelity, a lie so bold and baseless that it was almost impressive. But fighting it would have taken years and money Madeline didn't have access to anymore. Grant had frozen everything the moment he filed. Madeline looked down at the papers. The black ink seemed to swim before her eyes for a moment, not from tears, but from the sheer audacity of what was written there. Grant Sterling's Madeline Sterling. It looked so official, so final. "Well," Grant prompted, drumming his fingers on the armrest. "Come on, Maddie. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. You know you can't afford a trial. Just sign it, take the Honda, and go find a nice little apartment somewhere. I'm doing you a favor by not suing you for legal fees." Madeline slowly lifted her eyes. They were a piercing shade of green, usually warm, but today they were as cold as the glass windows behind her. She reached into her purse. Grant tensed slightly, perhaps expecting a tissue, a handkerchief, or maybe a desperate plea for money. Instead, she pulled out a simple, cheap ballpoint pen. "You really think this is a victory, don't you, Grant?" Her voice was soft, barely above a whisper, yet it carried a weight that silenced the room. Grant laughed, a harsh, barking sound. "Victory? No, Maddie. This is just trimming the fat. I built this company. I built this life. You were just along for the ride. And frankly, you've become dead weight. Tiffany understands the industry. She understands me. You? You're still the same quiet girl from Nebraska I felt sorry for. Madeline didn't blink. She uncapped the pen. I'm signing, she said, her voice steady. Not because I agree with your lies, but because I want to be as far away from you as possible. Just sign the damn paper, Grant snapped, his patience evaporating. Madeline lowered the pen. The tip scratched against the paper, the sound loud in the silent room. Madeline Sterling. She signed it with a flourish, a signature far more confident than the woman Grant thought he knew. She closed the folder and pushed it back toward Benedict. Done, she said. Grant let out a long breath, a grin spreading across his face. He looked like a predator who had just finished playing with his food. Finally. God, that was exhausting. He stood up, buttoning his tailored suit jacket. Benedict, send the copies to my office. I'm leaving. He looked at Madeline one last time, his eyes raking over her simple dress with disdain. You have until nearly 5 o'clock to get your things out of the house. Tiffany wants to redecorate the master bedroom tonight. It was a cruel, unnecessary jab, designed to draw blood. But Madeline just stood up, smoothing her skirt. She picked up her purse. Goodbye, Grant, she said. I hope the life you bought is worth the price you paid. Grant chuckled, shaking his head as he walked toward the door. The price? Honey, I got a discount. Enjoy the Honda. Try not to break down on the highway. He stormed out, the heavy doors swinging shut behind him. Madeline stood alone in the conference room for a moment. Benedict, the lawyer, looked at her with a flicker of pity. Mrs. Sterling, he said awkwardly. If you need a cab. No, thank you, Mr. Benedict, Madeline said. A strange, ghostly smile touched her lips. I have a ride. As Madeline walked down the long, marble corridor to the elevators, her mind replayed the last decade. It wasn't a montage of love and happiness, but a slow, creeping horror story of erasure. When she met Grant, he was nobody. He was a frantic, brilliant, but disorganized coder, pitching a logistics algorithm that no one wanted to buy. Madeline had been working as an administrative assistant at a venture capital firm. She wasn't wealthy, or so she told everyone. She was quiet, efficient, and observant. She saw potential in Grant. She helped him fix his pitch deck. She introduced him to the right people at the parties she was invited to. Invitations Grant never questioned how she got. When his first funding round was about to collapse because of a regulatory oversight, it was Madeline who stayed up for 3 nights straight, rewriting the compliance docs, using knowledge she shouldn't have known. They married 6 months later, and as Sterling Tech grew, Madeline shrank. Grant started treating her less like a partner and more like a prop. He needed a trophy wife to look good at galas, but Madeline wasn't flashy enough for him. She didn't like the spotlight. She preferred to work in the background, managing the household, managing him. Then came Tiffany. Tiffany was 24, a marketing intern at Sterling Tech, who laughed at all of Grant's jokes and wore dresses that cost more than a car. Grant didn't even try to hide it. He wanted someone who looked the part of a billionaire's wife. He wanted flash. He wanted noise. Madeline stepped into the elevator, watching the numbers count down. The sadness she expected to feel was absent. Instead, there was a simmering heat in her chest. Grant had made 2 fatal mistakes. First, he assumed Madeline was poor because she lived simply. Second, he assumed that because she was quiet, she was weak. He had forgotten that the most dangerous things in nature are often the silent ones, the calm before the storm, the predator stalking through the grass. The elevator dinged at the lobby level. The doors slid open, revealing the opulent foyer of the building. Madeline stepped out, her heels clicking rhythmically on the polished stone floor. She checked her phone. One new message. Subject: delivery confirmation. Body: the package has arrived. It is waiting at the curb. Madeline's lips curved slightly. Grant thought he was taking everything from her. He thought he was leaving her with a 10-year-old Honda Civic and a broken heart. He didn't realize that for 10 years, Madeline hadn't been living her life. She had been playing a role she had curated to protect him, to help him grow, to be the stable foundation for his chaotic genius. But the play was over. The curtain had fallen, and the costume was coming off. The revolving doors of the office building spun Madeline out into the crisp Chicago afternoon. The wind was biting, whipping her hair around her face, but she barely felt the cold. What she did feel was the stare of a dozen onlookers. Directly in front of the building entrance, in the no parking zone that was usually reserved for emergency vehicles or VIPs, Grant was standing. He was leaning against his black Mercedes S-Class, looking at his phone. And next to him was Tiffany. She was stunning, in a superficial, manufactured way. Blonde extensions, heavy makeup, and a red coat that screamed for attention. She was laughing at something Grant was showing her on the screen. When she saw Madeline exit the building, her laughter stopped, replaced by a sneer of triumph. Grant looked up. He clearly hadn't left yet. He had been waiting. He wanted one last audience. He wanted to see Madeline walk to the parking garage, shoulders slumped, defeated. "There she is," Tiffany called out, her voice shrill and carrying over the noise of the traffic. "The ex-Mrs. Sterling. Did you cry in there? You look a little pale." Grant smirked, slipping his arm around Tiffany's waist. "Be nice, Tiff. She's having a hard day. She just realized she has to pump her own gas from now on." Madeline stopped at the top of the stairs. She looked down at them. They looked like characters in a bad soap opera, overacting their villainy. "Grant," Madeline said, her voice calm, "you're blocking the entrance." "I own the building, Maddie. Or well, my company leases the top 5 floors, which is basically the same thing," Grant said. "I can park where I want, unlike you. I think the public parking garage is 3 blocks over. Better hurry, the meter is probably running." A few people walking by slowed down, sensing the drama. A security guard looked uncomfortable, but didn't dare ask Grant Sterling to move his car. "You really are pathetic," Tiffany spat, stepping forward. "You held him back for years. Look at you. You look like a librarian. Grant needs a queen, not a servant." Madeline tilted her head. "A queen?" she repeated. "Is that what you are, Tiffany?" "I'm the woman he loves," Tiffany said, tossing her hair. "And I'm the woman who's going to spend his money better than you ever did." "It's not his money," Madeline said simply. Grant laughed again. "Oh, here we go. Delusional to the end. It's my name on the building, Maddie. My code, my company." "Is it?" Madeline asked. She took a step down the stairs. "Who rewrote the kernel for the logistics AI in 2018 when you hit a wall? Who secured the financing from the Zurich group when the banks turned you down? Who smoothed over the regulatory issues in the EU last year?" Grant's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. "I did. My team did." "Your team," Madeline corrected. "And who told the team what to do? You were too busy cheating on me to read the briefing packets. I wrote them, Grant. Every night while you were working late. I was at the kitchen table, fixing your mistakes." Grant's face reddened. "You're crazy. You're a secretary, a glorified housewife." "Believe what you want," Madeline said, reaching the bottom of the stairs. She was now standing only a few feet away from them. "But remember this moment, Grant. Remember that you chose this." "I chose happiness," Grant shouted, playing to the small crowd that had gathered. I chose a woman with life in her veins. Go find your Honda, Madeline. Go drive back to mediocrity." Tiffany giggled. "Yeah, bye-bye. Don't worry. We'll send you a postcard from our honeymoon in the Maldives." Madeline looked past them, her gaze fixed on something down the street. The sound of a low, rhythmic thrumming began to vibrate in the air. It wasn't the sound of normal traffic. It was a deep, guttural growl, like a beast waking up. "I don't drive a Honda anymore, Grant," Madeline said softly. The sound grew louder. Heads turned. Pedestrians stopped walking. Even the traffic seemed to pause. Around the corner, a vehicle appeared. It was low to the ground, sleek and predatory. It was painted a deep midnight blue that looked almost black until the light hit it, revealing shimmering flecks of diamond dust in the paint. It wasn't a Mercedes. It wasn't a Ferrari. It was a Koenigsegg Jesko, a $3 million hypercar, one of the fastest and most exclusive production cars on the planet. Its engine roared, a twin-turbo V8 symphony that shook the windows of the building. Grant froze. He knew cars. He knew exactly what that was. And he knew that there were only a handful in the country. "Who the hell is that?" Grant whispered, his jealousy instantly peaking. "Some celebrity?" The car prowled forward, the massive rear wing casting a shadow over the sidewalk. It pulled up directly behind Grant's Mercedes, making his luxury sedan look like a toy. The driver's door of the Koenigsegg didn't open immediately. The engine idled, a menacing purr. "Probably one of your investors," Tiffany said, her eyes wide with greed. "Maybe we should say hi." Madeline didn't say a word. She walked past Grant. She walked past Tiffany. She walked right up to the driver's side of the hypercar. "Hey!" Grant yelled. "Get away from that! You're going to scratch it! You can't just touch someone's car like that!" Madeline ignored him. She reached out, and the dihedral synchrohelix door swept open in a smooth, upward motion. The driver stepped out. He was a tall, broad-shouldered man in a black tactical suit, wearing sunglasses. He looked like a bodyguard for a head of state. He walked around the car, ignored Grant completely, and bowed his head slightly to Madeline. "Good afternoon, ma'am," the man said, his voice deep and respectful. "The transfer is complete. The jet is fueled and waiting at O'Hare." Grant's jaw dropped. Tiffany looked confused, blinking rapidly. "Ma'am?" Grant sputtered. "What? Who is this?" Madeline turned back to face her ex-husband. The wind caught her hair, blowing it back from her face. She looked taller now, stronger. "Grant," she said, "meet Arthur, my head of security." "Security?" Grant laughed nervously. "For what? Your coupon collection?" Madeline reached into her purse again, but instead of a pen, she pulled out a key fob. It was made of carbon fiber and silver. She pressed a button. The lights of the Koenigsegg flashed. "No," Madeline said. "For the consortium." Grant stopped laughing. The color drained from his face. "The consortium? That's a myth. That's an rumors board theory." "Is it?" Madeline asked. "You always wondered where I got the money to bail you out in the early days. You wondered why the Zurich group met with us. You thought it was luck." She took the keys from Arthur. "It wasn't luck, Grant. It was me." The engine of the Koenigsegg Jesko didn't just roar, it screamed, a high-pitched mechanical wail that reverberated off the glass skyscrapers of downtown Chicago. Madeline didn't look back. She shifted gears, the carbon fiber paddle shifters clicking satisfyingly under her fingers, and the $3 million machine lurched forward with the force of a fighter jet taking off. In the rearview mirror, she saw Grant and Tiffany shrink into tiny, insignificant dots. For a fleeting second, she saw Grant take a step into the street, his arms raised in a gesture of confusion and rage, before he was swallowed by the distance. Inside the cockpit of the hypercar, the silence was absolute, save for the hum of the engine behind her head. The interior was a sanctuary of Alcantara leather and brushed aluminum. "Route set for the private hangar at O'Hare, Miss Harrington." Arthur's voice came over the encrypted comms system, built into the car's console. He was following in a black SUV, acting as her tail. "Thank you, Arthur," Madeline said, hearing her maiden name, Harrington, spoken aloud for the first time in 10 years, sent a shiver down her spine. It wasn't a shiver of fear, but of awakening. For a decade, she had been Madeline Sterling. She had buried Madeline Harrington, the heiress to the Harrington global logistics empire, deep underground. She had done it for love, or what she thought was love. When she met Grant, she was tired of men who looked at her and saw a bank account. She wanted to be seen for her. She wanted to build something from the ground up. So, she cut herself off from the family fortune, took a pseudonym, and lived on a secretary's salary. She had given Grant the greatest gift a billionaire could give, the illusion that he was the hero. She reached over and touched the glove compartment. Inside was a small, velvet box. She opened it with one hand. It contained her old signet ring, gold with the Harrington crest, a phoenix rising from the ashes. She slipped it onto her right ring finger. It fit perfectly. Meanwhile, back on the sidewalk, the silence that Madeline left behind was deafening. Grant stood frozen, staring at the empty space where the hypercar had been. The smell of burnt rubber lingered in the air. "What just happened?" Tiffany asked, her voice trembling slightly. She tugged on Grant's sleeve. "Grant? That car? That was a rental, right? She probably rented it to make you jealous." Grant shook his head slowly, his eyes wide and unblinking. "You can't rent a Jesco, Tiffany. You have to be invited to buy one. The waiting list is 3 years long." "So, she slept with someone rich?" Tiffany suggested, a sneer trying to fight its way through her confusion. "That's it. She found some sugar daddy." "Arthur," Grant muttered. She called the security guard, Arthur. He spun around, panic starting to claw at his throat. He pulled out his phone and dialed Benedict, his lawyer. His fingers fumbled over the screen. "Grant," Benedict answered on the first ring. "Did she sign? Is it done?" "She signed," Grant said, his voice breathless. "But Benedict, you need to run a background check again. A deep one. Not just the credit bureaus. I need you to dig into her birth certificate, her parents, everything." "We did this 10 years ago, Grant," Benedict sighed. "She's a nobody from Nebraska. Her parents were farmers." "Check again," Grant screamed, causing a passing woman to jump. "She just drove away in a $3 million car with a private security detail. Farmers don't have security details, Benedict. Find out who I just divorced." He hung up the phone and looked at his own car, the Mercedes S-Class. 10 minutes ago, it had seemed like the pinnacle of success. Now, parked where the Koenigsegg had been, it looked like a sensible, boring sedan for a mid-level manager. "Grant, people are staring," Tiffany whined. "Let's just go. Who cares if she found a rich boyfriend? You're still the CEO of Sterling Tech. You're still the genius." Grant looked at Tiffany. For the first time, the heavy makeup and the flashy clothes didn't look appealing. They looked cheap. He shook the thought away. No, he was the winner here. He had the company. He had the house. Madeline was just playing games. "You're right," Grant said, straightening his tie, though his hands were still shaking. "She's just trying to get in my head. Let's go to Le Monde. I need a drink." But as he drove toward the restaurant, Grant couldn't shake the feeling that he had just stepped off a cliff, and he hadn't hit the bottom yet. 3 months passed. The sprawling mansion in the Hamptons, which Grant had fought so hard to keep in the divorce, was quiet. Too quiet. Tiffany had redecorated, just as she promised. The warm, rustic charm that Madeline had cultivated, the oak bookshelves, the soft wool rugs, the vintage maps, was gone. In its place was modern art that looked like splattered paint, cold marble floors, and furniture that was uncomfortable to sit on, but looked expensive in Instagram photos. Grant sat in his home office, staring at his computer screens. The glow of the monitors illuminated the dark circles under his eyes. "Damn it!" He slammed his fist on the desk. "What is it now?" Tiffany asked from the doorway. She was holding a glass of wine, wearing a silk robe. It was 11 a.m. on a Tuesday. "The Asian distribution network is down again," Grant growled, rubbing his temples. "The code is glitching. Every time we try to route shipments through Singapore, the system flags it as a compliance error. We're losing $50,000 an hour." "So fix it," Tiffany said, taking a sip of wine. "You're the genius coder. Go in there and type the zeros and ones." Grant looked at her with pure exhaustion. "It's not that simple, Tiff. I didn't write that part of the code. Madeline did." The name hung in the air like a curse word. "Madeline?" Tiffany scoffed. "She was a secretary, Grant. Stop giving her credit. She probably just copied it from Google." "No," Grant whispered, looking at the complex strings of data on his screen. "I used to think that too. But I've been looking at the logs. Every night, between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m. for 5 years, there are edits from her user account. She built the firewall. She built the routing algorithm. She built the brain of this company." Since the divorce, Sterling Tech had been bleeding. Clients were leaving. The seamless efficiency that the company was famous for had evaporated. It turned out that efficiency was just Madeline, working 18-hour days in the background, fixing Grant's messy vision into workable reality. "Well, hire someone to fix it," Tiffany snapped. "We have money." "Do we?" Grant spun his chair around. "You spent $40,000 on curtains last week, Tiffany, and the investors, they're pulling out." "Why?" "Because of the rumor," Grant said. He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the manicured lawn that Madeline used to tend herself. "There's a rumor on Wall Street. A new player is entering the logistics market, a company called Phoenix Systems. They're buying up shipping lanes, warehousing, everything, and they're undercutting us by 10%. So, compete with them." "I can't," Grant admitted, his voice cracking, "because whoever runs Phoenix Systems knows our internal pricing model. They know our weak spots. It's like they have our playbook." Just then, Grant's phone rang. It was Benedict. "Grant, I have the report," Benedict said. His voice sounded strange, hollow. "About what? The Phoenix competitor?" "No," Benedict said. "About Madeline." Grant's heart skipped a beat. "What did you find? Did you find the boyfriend?" "Grant, you need to sit down." "I am standing in my office, Benedict. Just tell me." "There is no boyfriend," Benedict said. "I had to call in a favor with a contact at the NSA to get past the privacy encryptions on her file. Grant, Madeline isn't a Sterling. She's not even a Nebraskan farm girl. That background was fabricated by a ghost agency." "Who is she?" Grant demanded. "Her birth name is Madeline Eleanor Harrington," Benedict whispered. "She is the sole heiress to the Harrington Trust. Her grandfather was Silas Harrington, the man who practically invented modern container shipping." Grant dropped the phone. It clattered onto the hardwood floor, the screen cracking. The Harrington family. They were American royalty. Old money. The kind of money that didn't just buy yachts. It bought countries. They were worth billions, not 1 or 2 billion. Tens of billions. Grant fell back into his chair. He remembered all the times he had lectured Madeline about saving money on groceries. All the times he had scolded her for buying a $5 coffee. All the times he had told her she didn't understand how business worked. She had been sitting on a fortune that could have bought his entire company 100 times over, and she had never said a word. She had wanted to build a life with him, on his terms. She had lowered herself to lift him up, and he had thrown her away for a woman who just bought $40,000 curtains. "Grant?" Tiffany asked, looking at the broken phone. "What did he say?" Grant looked up at her, his eyes wild. "Get out." "Excuse me?" "Get out!" Grant roared, grabbing a vase from the desk and hurling it against the wall. "Pack your bags and get out of my house." 6 months after the divorce, the silence in Grant Sterling's life was louder than any scream. The sprawling Sterling Tech headquarters in downtown Chicago, once a buzzing hive of innovation and arrogance, now felt like a mausoleum. Grant sat alone in his corner office, the lights dimmed, staring at the glow of 3 monitors that painted a picture of absolute catastrophe. The stock price, which had hovered at a robust $140 a share during his marriage, was now trading at 42 tor and dropping like a stone. It wasn't just a slump, it was a hemorrhage. "Damn it!" Grant slammed his fist onto the mahogany desk, rattling the empty coffee cups that had accumulated over the last 48 hours. On the main screen, a red alert blinked incessantly. "Critical failure. Asian logistics hub. Routing error." For the last 3 months, the company's proprietary algorithm, the brain that Grant took all the credit for, had been suffering from digital dementia. Shipments meant for Tokyo were ending up in Taipei. Perishable goods were rotting in customs because the automated compliance forms weren't generating correctly. Clients were furious. Lawsuits were piling up on the legal department's desk like snowdrifts. Grant rubbed his temples, feeling a migraine pulsing behind his eyes. He knew exactly what the problem was. The code was breaking down because it hadn't been maintained. For a decade, Madeline had spent her nights quietly patching the kernel, optimizing the subroutines, and anticipating regulatory changes before they happened. She had done it while Grant slept, while he watched TV, or while he was out with Tiffany. He had fired the only engineer who actually understood how the machine worked, his wife. The intercom buzzed, making him jump. It was his assistant, her voice trembling. "Mr. Sterling, the board of directors is on line 1. They're talking about a vote of no confidence." Grant stared at the phone. He couldn't take that call. Not yet. He needed a win. He needed a lifeline. "Tell them I'm in a meeting," Grant lied, his voice cracking. Tell them I'm going to New York. I'm going to the summit." The Global Logistics Summit at the Pierre Hotel in New York City. It was the most exclusive event of the fiscal year, a black tie gathering of the titans who controlled the world's supply chains. If there was any hope of finding a new investor, a partner, or even just someone to buy him out before the ship sank entirely, it was there. 24 hours later, Grant stood at the edge of the Pierre Hotel's grand ballroom. He was wearing his tuxedo, the same one he had worn to accept the Innovator of the Year award 2 years ago. But tonight it felt like a costume. The ballroom was a dazzling display of old-world wealth. Immense crystal chandeliers dripped light onto the crowd below. The air smelled of expensive champagne, heavy perfume, and the distinct, metallic scent of power. Grant scanned the room, desperate to make eye contact with anyone who mattered. He saw the CEO of FedEx laughing with the Minister of Trade from Singapore. He saw the head of Maersk clinking glasses with a tech billionaire from Silicon Valley. Grant adjusted his tie, forcing a smile onto his face, and stepped into the fray. "Jim!" Grant called out, spotting a venture capitalist who had funded his Series B round. "Jim, good to see you." The man turned, his smile vanishing instantly when he saw Grant. "Grant, I heard about the Q3 numbers. Rough stuff." "Just a blip, Jim," Grant said, sweating slightly under the collar. "We're retooling the algorithm. Actually, I wanted to talk to you about a bridge loan." "I have to go, Grant," Jim said, cutting him off and turning his back. "My wife is waving at me." It happened again and again. Men he had golfed with, men he had drank with, men who had envied him, they all turned away. He was radioactive. He wasn't one of them anymore. He was a failure. And in this room, failure was contagious. Grant retreated to the bar, ordering a double scotch. His hands were shaking. He was going to lose it all. The company, the reputation, the legacy. He looked around the room, feeling small, insignificant, and utterly alone. Tiffany was long gone. She had packed her bags the moment the credit cards started declining, selling her story to a tabloid on her way out. Suddenly, the hum of conversation in the ballroom died down. It started near the entrance and rippled outward like a wave until the entire room fell into a respectful, stunned silence. Grant turned around to see what was happening. At the top of the grand marble staircase, a woman had appeared. She was breathtaking. She wore a floor-length gown of emerald green silk that seemed to shimmer with its own inner light. The dress was cut to perfection, daring yet elegant, revealing the strength of her shoulders and the grace of her neck. A necklace of cascading diamonds and emeralds rested against her skin. Stones so large and flawless they probably cost more than Sterling Tech's current market cap. Grant squinted. The woman looked familiar. The way she held her head high, chin tilted up with regal indifference. The way her eyes swept over the room, not seeking approval, but commanding it. She took the first step down, and the light hit her face. Grant's glass slipped from his fingers and shattered on the floor. The sound was swallowed by the carpet, unnoticed by the mesmerized crowd. "Madeline?" he whispered. But it wasn't the Madeline he knew. The Madeline he remembered wore grey cardigans and sensible shoes. She walked with her head down, trying to blend into the wallpaper. She spoke softly, apologizing for taking up space. This woman descended the stairs like a queen entering her court. And she wasn't alone. On her right arm was Thomas Wright, the chairman of the Federal Trade Commission, the most powerful regulator in the country. On her left was the CEO of the Harrington Trust, a man known for being unreachable. They were leaning in, listening to her speak, laughing at something she said. The crowd parted for her. It was a red sea of tuxedos and designer gowns splitting open to let her pass. Grant watched in horror and fascination as the CEO of Amazon stepped forward to shake her hand, bowing slightly. Driven by a surge of adrenaline and a twisted sense of entitlement, Grant pushed himself off the bar. He had to reach her. If she was here, if she was this powerful, she could fix it. She owed him that, didn't she? For the 10 years of marriage, for the life he gave her. He shoved past a waiter, ignoring the spilled champagne. "Madeline," he hissed, trying to keep his voice down but frantic. She didn't turn. She continued talking to Thomas Wright, her profile sharp and beautiful. "Madeline," he said louder, reaching the inner circle of the elite. She stopped. Slowly, deliberately, she turned around. The conversation around her died instantly. Her green eyes landed on him. There was no anger in them, no hurt, just a cool, detached curiosity, like a scientist looking at a bug under a microscope. "Grant," she said. Her voice was smooth, polished, and utterly devoid of warmth. "I didn't expect to see you here. I heard tickets were strictly for active market leaders. The insult was subtle, but it cut Grant to the bone. He felt the eyes of the room on him. "I need to talk to you," Grant stammered, sweat beading on his forehead. "Privately. Now." Madeline glanced at the chairman of the FTC, then back at Grant. "I'm quite busy, Grant. Perhaps you can make an appointment with my secretary next month." "It's about the company," Grant blurted out, desperation stripping away his pride. "Sterling Tech, it's dying, Maddie. The code, the Asian distribution network, it's all crashing. I know you wrote the patch. I know you have the encryption keys. You have to help me." A ripple of whispers went through the crowd. Grant Sterling, begging his ex-wife for code. Madeline took a slow step toward him. She towered over him in her heels, her presence consuming the space. "You want my help?" she asked softly. "Yes," Grant pleaded, his eyes wet. "Look, I know I messed up. I know I hurt you. But we were a team, Maddie. You and me against the world. Remember? We built that company together." Madeline laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound that chilled the air. "We were never a team, Grant," she said, loud enough for the nearby circle to hear. "I was your engine. You were the hood ornament. I did the work. I fixed the problems. I managed the crises. And you took the bows. You took the credit. And when you got bored, you threw me away like a used napkin." "It was Tiffany," Grant cried, grasping at straws. "She manipulated me. She's gone now, Maddie. I kicked her out. It's just me. I'm alone in that big house. We can fix this. Please, just give me the code." Madeline shook her head slowly, a look of pity crossing her face. "I didn't steal your code, Grant. I am the code. The system is failing because it doesn't have its architect. And the architect is working for someone else now." Grant froze. "What? Who? Who are you working for?" "Have you heard of Phoenix Systems?" she asked. Grant's blood ran cold. Phoenix Systems was the mysterious new firm that had been eating his market share for months. They were faster, smarter, and cheaper. They were destroying him. "That's you?" Grant gasped. "It is," Madeline said. "And we aren't just a competitor, Grant. We are the future. You're looking at the past." She turned to walk away, dismissing him as if he were nothing more than a beggar on the street. Panic, blind and irrational, seized Grant's brain. He couldn't let her leave. She was his property. She was his wife. She couldn't just walk away and be better than him. "No!" Grant lunged forward, grabbing her wrist roughly. "You can't do this to me. You owe me." The room gasped. Before Grant could even tighten his grip, a shadow materialized from the crowd. It was Arthur. The massive head of security moved with terrifying speed. He didn't strike Grant. He simply clamped a hand onto Grant's wrist, the one holding Madeline, and squeezed. Grant yelped in pain, his fingers springing open. Arthur twisted Grant's arm behind his back and shoved him forward, forcing him to bow before Madeline. "I would strongly suggest you do not touch Miss Harrington again," Arthur rumbled, his voice low and dangerous. Madeline rubbed her wrist, looking down at Grant, who was doubled over, red-faced and panting. "You never knew who I really was," she said, her voice echoing in the silent ballroom. "You never asked about my family. You never asked about my dreams. You were so busy looking in the mirror, you never saw the person standing next to you." She smoothed the silk of her dress. "Goodbye, Grant. Try not to cause a scene on your way out." She turned and walked away, the emerald dress flowing behind her like water. The crowd parted for her again, murmuring in awe. Arthur released Grant with a final shove that sent him stumbling backward, nearly colliding with a waiter carrying a tray of champagne flutes. Grant stood there, rubbing his throbbing wrist, gasping for air. The music started up again. The laughter resumed. The elite of the world turned their backs on him. closing the circle, shutting him out. He stood in the center of the ballroom, surrounded by billions of dollars, realizing that for the first time in his life, he was truly, completely poor. 2 weeks later, the sky over Chicago was a bruised purple, heavy with the threat of a storm that refused to break. Inside the 42nd floor conference room of Holloway and O'Neill, the atmosphere was even more oppressive. Grant sat in the same leather chair he had occupied less than a year ago. Back then, he had leaned back with his legs crossed, checking his gold watch, annoyed that his wife was taking too long to sign away her rights. He had been the predator then, toying with a mouse. Now, the leather felt cold against his back. Grant was hunched forward, his elbows resting on the mahogany table, his head buried in his hands. His suit, usually tailored to perfection, hung loosely on his frame. He had lost 15 pounds in the last month. His tie was crooked, and a shadow of stubble darkened his jaw. He hadn't slept more than 2 hours a night since the SEC auditors had walked into the Sterling tech lobby. Across the table sat 3 men he didn't know. They weren't family lawyers like Benedict. These men were corporate executioners. They wore identical black suits, their faces impassive, their eyes scanning documents with the efficiency of machines. They represented the entity that was acquiring Sterling Tech in a distress sale. A hostile rescue, they called it. To Grant, it felt like an autopsy on a body that was still breathing. "Mr. Sterling," the lead attorney said. His name was Vance, a man with a voice like grinding gravel. "We don't have all day. The offer expires at noon. If you don't sign, the bank forecloses on the corporate assets by 12:01. You know what that means. The insolvency investigation goes public. The forensic accountants get involved." Grant flinched. The forensic accountants. That was the gun to his head. In his desperation to save the company after Madeline left, Grant had moved money around, funds that shouldn't have been moved. It wasn't malicious theft, he told himself, just creative accounting to plug the holes until the next quarter. But the law didn't see it that way. If he didn't sell now, under the terms of this specific deal, he wasn't just looking at bankruptcy. He was looking at federal prison. "I need a moment," Grant croaked. His throat was dry, tasting of bile and stale coffee. "You've had 2 weeks," Vance replied, sliding a heavy fountain pen across the polished wood. It spun and came to a stop directly in front of Grant. "Sign the transfer of ownership. Step down as CEO. The acquiring firm absorbs the debt, and the investigation goes away. It's the only lifeboat you're going to get." Grant stared at the pen. It was heavy, expensive, just like the life he used to live. He thought about Tiffany. She hadn't just left. She had sold her story to a tabloid. "My nightmare with the broke billionaire," the headline had read. He thought about his friends in the industry. Not one had returned his calls. He was radioactive. With a trembling hand, Grant picked up the pen. The nib hovered over the signature line. Grant Sterling. He wrote his name. But it didn't look like his signature anymore. The flourish was gone. The confidence was gone. It looked like the scratching of a dying man. "It's done," Grant whispered, dropping the pen. "The company. It's yours. Who is it? Who bought me out? You have to tell me now." He expected to hear a name like Amazon, or maybe a logistics rival like FedEx or Maersk. He braced himself to hear the name of a competitor he had once mocked at a cocktail party. Vance didn't answer. He simply gathered the documents, checked the signature, and nodded to his colleagues. They stood up in unison, closing their briefcases with a simultaneous snap. "The buyer requested a private transition meeting," Vance said, his face breaking into a thin, shark-like smile. "She's waiting in the executive suite." "She?" Grant blinked, his eyes bloodshot. "Who is she?" Vance pressed a button on the intercom. Send her in. The heavy double doors at the end of the room, the same doors Grant had stormed out of so triumphantly months ago, began to open. Grant didn't have the energy to stand. He swiveled his chair slowly, dread pooling in his stomach. First came the sound, the rhythmic, authoritative click-clack of heels on the marble floor. It wasn't a hesitant walk. It was a march of conquest. Then she stepped into the light. She was wearing a navy blue power suit, tailored sharply to accentuate a figure that radiated strength. Her hair, once worn in a simple messy bun, was now styled in sleek, cascading waves. She carried no purse, no accessories, only a single, thin file folder. Grant's breath hitched in his throat. His brain refused to process the image for a second. "Madeline?" he breathed. She didn't smile. Her green eyes, once so full of warmth and patience for him, were now clear and cold as glacial water. She walked past the lawyers, who bowed their heads respectfully to her. She walked to the head of the table, the seat Grant had vacated, and sat down. She placed the folder on the table and interlaced her fingers, looking at him. "Hello, Grant," she said. Her voice was different. The softness he remembered was gone, replaced by the crisp, articulate tone of a woman who commanded boardrooms. "You," Grant stammered, gripping the arms of his chair to stop his hands from shaking. "You're the buyer. You're Phoenix Systems." "Phoenix Systems is a subsidiary of Harrington Global," Madeline corrected calmly. "My family's holding company. I serve as the chairwoman of the board. We specialize in acquiring distressed assets with high potential, but poor leadership." "Poor leadership," Grant repeated, the insult stinging even through his shock. "You planned this. You set me up." "I didn't have to set you up, Grant," Madeline said, leaning back. "I simply stopped propping you up. There is a difference." "You bought my company," Grant said, his voice rising in a mix of hysteria and disbelief. "With what money? The alimony I didn't give you?" "With the trust fund I accessed the day I left you," she replied. "The one I didn't touch for 10 years because I wanted to build something real with you. I wanted to be your partner, not your financier. But you didn't want a partner. You wanted an audience." Grant felt the room spinning. The scale of his mistake was so massive it was physically nauseating. He had been married to one of the wealthiest women in America, and he had treated her like a servant because she preferred to be humble. "So what now?" Grant asked, tears finally spilling over his eyelids. "You came here to gloat? To rub my nose in it? You own sterling tech. Congratulations. It's a sinking ship." "It was a sinking ship," Madeline said, "because the captain was asleep at the wheel. We've already patched the code. My team, the team I hired, has been working on the integration for weeks. We'll be profitable by next quarter." She opened the thin folder she had brought with her. She pulled out a single, thick envelope and slid it across the long mahogany table. It stopped inches from Grant's hand. Grant looked at it with fear. "What is this? A lawsuit? Are you suing me for the last 10 years?" "Open it," she commanded. Grant's shaking fingers tore open the seal. He pulled out a document. It was a property deed. He scanned the legal text, his brow furrowing in confusion. 14 Oceanview Drive, East Hampton. It was the mansion, his prize possession, the symbol of his success. "I don't understand," Grant whispered, looking up at her. "The bank seized this yesterday. It was collateral." "I bought the debt from the bank this morning," Madeline said quietly. "And I transferred the deed to your name, free and clear. The house is yours, Grant. No mortgage, no liens. Nobody can take it from you." Grant stared at her, his mouth agape. A flicker of hope, pathetic and desperate, ignited in his chest. Maddie, you're giving it back to me? Why? After everything I said? After Tiffany? He stood up, his knees wobbling. Is this you giving us a second chance? I can change, Maddie. I've learned my lesson. We can live there. We can start over. Madeline's expression didn't shift. She didn't look at him with love. She looked at him with a profound, terrifying pity. Sit down, Grant, she said. He froze. The tone wasn't an invitation. It was an order. He sank back into the chair. I'm not giving you the house because I love you, Madeline said, her voice dropping to a near whisper that carried more weight than a scream. And I'm certainly not giving it to you so we can start over. That door didn't just close, Grant. I bricked it up. Then why? Grant wept. Why give me a $10 million house? Madeline stood up. She walked to the window, looking out at the grey Chicago skyline, the city she now effectively ruled. Because I know you, she said, her back to him. I know that if I left you with nothing, you would turn yourself into a victim. You would tell everyone that the world was unfair, that you were robbed, that you were a martyr. She turned around, her silhouette framed by the stormy light. But now you have the castle, she continued, her eyes locking onto his. You have the big, empty mansion you fought so hard to keep. You have the status symbol. But you have no job. You have no company. You have no reputation. And you have no one to share it with. Grant felt a chill run through his bones that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. I want you to wake up every morning in that silent house, Madeline said, walking toward the door. I want you to walk through those empty rooms and look at the furniture Tiffany bought. I want you to sit by the pool alone, and I want you to realize every single day that you had a woman who would have lived in a cardboard box with you if you had just been kind. She reached the door. Arthur, her head of security, was waiting there. He held the door open for her. It's not a gift, Grant, Madeline said, delivering the final strike. It's a museum of your ego. Live in it. Maddie, please, Grant sobbed, realizing the true horror of his sentence. He wasn't being saved. He was being exiled to a gilded cage. Don't leave me here. I have nothing. Madeline paused one last time. She didn't look back. You have exactly what you signed up for, she said. The heavy doors clicked shut, sealing the silence. Grant Sterling was left alone in the cold conference room. He looked down at the deed in his hand, the piece of paper that gave him everything he thought he wanted, and confirmed that he had lost everything that mattered. He brought his hands to his face, and, for the first time in years, he screamed. But in the soundproof room, high above the city, no one heard him. Outside, the storm finally broke. Rain began to lash against the glass, blurring the world, washing away the traces of the man he used to be. Down on the street, the deep, guttural roar of a Koenigsegg engine flared to life, cutting through the thunder, before fading away into the distance, leaving Grant behind in the quiet. Grant learned the hard way that a person's worth isn't measured by the logo on their handbag or the volume of their voice, but by the strength of their character and the loyalty of their heart. He threw away a diamond because he wanted glitter, and he spent the rest of his life paying for it. If you enjoyed this story of karma and justice, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel. Don't forget to share this video with a friend who needs a reminder that the quiet ones are the most powerful. And make sure to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a new story. Thanks for watching.